Hey all, my name is Sriram. I'm a technical architect with Microsoft. Today I'll be talking to you all about Azure OpenAI Assistants. Azure OpenAI Assistants make the coding lifecycle of creating the Copilot experiences a lot more easier with the help of assistants. As a developer, you don't need to create and manage the threads, remember the state, and how much of the state you need to remember, etc. Here is a simple model, and let's go through what the model is. You start by creating an assistant, and then you create a thread. Every thread is associated with a message, and the thread runs the assistant. Assistant has access to functions, code interpreter, large language models. Given this, the cycle repeats for every message that comes in, wherein the message is associated with the thread, so you don't need to manage the thread again. So you create another run. You again take the help of assistant, and assistant uh, creates more messages, and you retrieve those messages and send back to the user. I know it is very tough uh, showing you this way, but trust me, it is easier than said. So once you get to the rhythm of this cycle of how you call assistants and make use of the assistant, then the ability of the assistant to interface with 120 plus custom functions of your choice, you can write as complex as a code that you like, and the ability to interpret the code and access that code as files is a great framework for creating your own co-pilots that implements your own business use cases. With that said, let's start coding. Let me actually open this in the split screen so that you all can easily follow. So let's start with us creating an assistant to begin with. So I'm at the step number one, and please follow carefully. Okay. You need OpenAI 1.10 version for that, and of course, access to Azure OpenAI model deployment, which you can easily do in Azure portal. So you need some of these libraries, then make a client connection. I loaded the required parameters such as deployment name, the keys that are needed for large language models, etc. Notice this. You establish a connection to the client, then you call assistant. So this is client.beta.assistants. That is a library. So all you need is import OpenAI, um, and from OpenAI you get Azure OpenAI. Run this. So you give set of instructions to the assistant, and this assistant actually performs the data visualization for us. So you can actually see the JSON. So the assistant has its own identifier, and everything else is captured and memorialized. The next step, step number two, is create a thread. Okay. So again, this is client.beta.thread. Create the thread. After you create the thread, then in this simple case, user is providing an input and the role is user, right? Message can have two roles, user role and an assistant role. Now it's a user role. And the content is create a visualization of a sine wave. So we ask it to render a sine wave and how it looks like. So the message is created. So once the message is created, associate the message with a thread, right? So client.beta.threads.message. So you associated the message with the thread there, and now um, this thread has the awareness of what this message is. At this point, just there is a user message. So the next step is you need to create a run. Remember, run is the actual thing that is associated with the thread, and thread can have many runs. So when you run, it instantiates the assistant, and the assistant actually performs processing. After the processing is complete, it updates the message back, and it updates the message with the role as assistant. And then we retrieve that message, and you can use that message in whichever way you want. That completes the life cycle. So let me go ahead and create a run. A run is created, and now assistant does its thing. So how does assistant know what to do? Assistant knows what to do because you give it a set of instructions, and you give access to a large language model, and you give access to a code interpreter. I will show you the custom functions in 5 minutes, but pay attention. First, if we understand this life cycle, then everything is very simple. After this, as you can see here, we created the run, and the run has multiple steps, all the way from in progress to complete and etc. So let's see what is the status of the run. Okay, so the run is completed. So once the run is completed, it updates the message. So let's check what it did to the message. So voila, now you can see the message. The message have um, a few more values. So let me actually copy the output, show you in a scratchpad file, new file, a text file. Why not? So Control V. So as you can see, now our message is not a single message. There are multiple things to that. Please pay attention to this. So if you see, all of these correspond to the same thread. So as a developer, you don't need to manage and maintain any threads. And also it is maintaining the state for you, if you see here, because it remembers everything in the order. So if you reverse the order, user asked create a visualization of a sine wave, and then it performed multiple steps. As an assistant, it performed multiple steps. So it actually did it in two steps. So the first step here is, if you see, it actually, the generated sine wave previews as follows. For x, which represents a point in time, right? So it actually knows it needs to create some data, and then it has to write some code on top of that data, and all of that stuff. It has to, it made its own decision as an assistant. And after that, it created the sine wave we asked, and it provided us an image file which has an image ID, and you can download that image. Okay, so it did that much, right? All transparently. As a programmer, you don't need to do all of these things. It remembered the state, it performs various actions, it updated the message. Now the next step is we need to retrieve that message in a meaningful form. So I know I need to capture the image from the location. So this is the image ID. So take that image ID and then create an image file called sinewave.png, and you see the sinewave.png. Voila, that's the sine wave. And let's add a new question to the thread. So we are repeating the process second time, right? If first time you did not understand, please follow. Now you will understand. Give another input. You give another message. You're not creating another thread. You're using the same thread. and therefore all the message state exists. You run the thread, create a new run, and retrieve. So it's a skewed, and then it goes to different phases, and it'll be complete in a second. So if you see now the state is even more, right? So as a user, this time you asked for it to show you the code, right? So it's up to you. It will show you the code. It's up to you to get that code, right? As a developer, you're on your own to get that code, but you know where the code is. It'll be the content in a value called text, and this is the code it used in order to create the sine wave. And also, it will give you the explanation of the code. And lastly, what you can do is you can again, third time, now I'm inputting it again. This time I'm asking, I want the visualization to be in the dark mode. And again, it remembers all the history, it does its own thing, right? So the step number 3, 4, 5, and 6 repeats, and it's up to you to take those steps and to retrieve those results. Now let's go through an advanced example. Um, so what I want to show you is advanced doesn't mean it is very tough. Advanced means we'll be using the capabilities of custom functions. So whatever you have seen thus far remains the same. Uh, the steps are exactly the same. Probably there are some helper functions. Um, I took these from the Microsoft example. The helper functions really helped me. Um, so again, get access. Here I am using Bing Search API. I'm using an API for getting lat long. I'm using um, Bing search results, etc. So here are the two simple functions, three simple functions I have access to. One gets lat long, and another gets top events in that lat long, and another gets the weather information and the attire recommendation in that particular weather, right? So this is your business logic, right? As an organization, you can define whatever custom functions you want. You can, I think, define 128, including one code interpreter. So 127, technically, you can. Um, so once you have access to that function, so these are the helper functions I was talking about. But so far, whatever you have seen, nothing changes, right? So the step number one is you create an assistant. Step number two, create a thread. Then you actually associate a message with the thread, and then you perform a run and give assistant some instructions, and then let the assistant update the message. You retrieve the files and send back the response to the user, right? So all of that stuff, in a sense, are encapsulated formally in these functions. I'll paste the Microsoft GitHub links below, right? So I don't want you to reinvent the wheel as far as um, you go. So I'm saying, like try 20 steps and wait for like 3 seconds between each of the step, right? Until the step completion. The reason I am doing that is I don't want it to go into the infinite loop sometimes if it takes too many steps. Um, then the next one is create message, right? So you know how to create a message. Um, the same functions that we used earlier, right? Client.beta, thread.messages. Only thing is now we are wrapping all of these in the functions and retrieving and print. You have seen me retrieving like bunch of JSONs, and those JSONs, like were not good to read. So this actually gives you a way to nicely read. These are nothing but the helper functions, right? So then this is like a web search assistant for me. Remember, we had to create the assistant, right? Right now, the helper classes, through helper classes, we have all the remaining setup. Now let's create an assistant. And to this assistant, as you can see, now I am registering the tools. If you are familiar with using GPT-4 functions, uh, it is exactly the same concept, right? So tools are nothing but, like a set of functions. They are of type function. The function will have a name, a description, and the parameters it takes, right? I have two functions. One is a weather function, and another one is for a lat long weather function, and the get top events um, in that location for that lat long, right? So for example, I will be asking it, like, can you suggest a weather appropriate attire with the recommended events in Madrid, Spain, right? So let's say I ask that question. Then it knows it has to access these two custom functions shown here. And you have to actually give these as available functions. Remember, this weather and get top events are of type functions. Okay, they are the physical functions we define. And now assistant get access to these two functions. Then nothing changes. The exactly same thing. You maintain an OpenAI connection. You give awareness of an LLM tool to that. Create your assistant, create your thread, create a run, and retrieve the messages. Exact same thing that we have done before. No change. So now what happens is, as it is running, right? Yeah, it took 34 seconds to run. So this is how the output looks like. As you can see, wherever you see the requires action, it is calling actually the two functions that it has access to, the custom functions. Let's actually copy paste and see the output it has given, right? So let's say go back there, Control A, Control V. So it just gave me some information, right? So it is currently at this point in time when I am recording this video on February the 15th, 6 Central Time in US. It's 9 degrees Celsius in Madrid. And it is just saying a nice woolen sweater and blah, blah, blah. As far as events are concerned, if you are into cosmetics, like if you are from Spain, hope this makes sense. So something like this, it's very easy to with assistance. You don't need to write like so much of the code, and it is as simple, right? You can put something like this in couple of hours and demo, right? So just to summarize again before wrapping up, assistance API provide you a very nice and intuitive way of getting any user input, associating the input with the thread, and create an assistant with a set of instructions and access to various tools such as functions, code interpreter, large language models. And then assistant actually, an instance of assistant run actually creates or modifies the message, and you retrieve and send back the message to the user. So this is a very new feature. It is hardly probably like 8 days old. So this gets even better and better. So I hope you enjoyed this session, and I will paste all the links and share your comments, and I can answer in case like if you are missing something. Um, Thanks a lot for your time today, and as usual, happy coding. Take care of your health. Bye.